You won't believe what they tried to do to her in front of 150 soldiers. But 72 hours later, the sky would belong to her. It happened in the middle of Hangar 4, at Fort Griffin, Texas. A massive, echo-filled space where steel walls kept secrets and reputations were forged. That morning, the entire base had been called in for a disciplinary review. What they got instead was a moment no one would ever forget. "Take off that pilot costume right now. Girl, you don't belong here." The words of Colonel Richard Albright rang through the hangar like a gunshot, silencing the murmur of 150 uniformed personnel. Every head turned to see who the colonel was humiliating. And there, standing motionless in her regulation boots, was Captain Ava Thompson, 28 years old, Air Force veteran of 6 years, and the only black woman in her squadron. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage, a calm, quiet fury that boiled just beneath the surface. Her uniform, once a symbol of pride, now felt like 100 pounds of concrete draped across her shoulders. The medals pinned to her chest, honors earned from missions that didn't even exist on paper, suddenly felt like branding irons. "Colonel," Ava began, her voice steady but tight. "With all due respect, my performance on recent missions." "Performance?" Albright scoffed, cutting her off with a laugh that was more insult than amusement. The officers behind him chuckled nervously, not sure whether to laugh or look away. "You spent a few hours in a simulator, and now you think you're a fighter pilot? This whole diversity program's a joke." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but the undertone was pure venom. The crowd pretended not to watch, but every pair of eyes was locked in. What they didn't know was that Ava Thompson wasn't just a symbolic face for some political initiative. She was a storm in quiet clothing. A woman carrying more classified clearances than most of them would ever see. But right now, they saw her only as a target, someone they believed didn't belong in their sky. The uniform they tried to strip from her that day wouldn't just fall to the floor. It would become the spark that ignited a reckoning the entire military would remember. When they made her strip that uniform, they thought they'd broken her. But what she carried in her pocket would break them. The moment Captain Ava Thompson walked out of Hangar 4, her Air Force uniform folded neatly under her arm. The base thought it had seen the end of her story. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ava had never truly left. Not in spirit, and certainly not in power. As she exited under the harsh Texas sun, her phone buzzed. A message flashed on her lock screen from a number that didn't officially exist. "Package delivered. Authorization confirmed. 72 hours. 3 words. That's all she needed. Because while Colonel Albright was celebrating with drinks at the officers' lounge, and Brad Callahan, the senator's son and social media golden boy, was posting her humiliation online for clout, Ava was already 3 moves ahead. She drove her beat-up 2015 Honda Civic through the quiet back roads of Denton County, heading toward the small apartment she rented off base. Her neighbors knew her as a quiet, respectful mechanic who fixed commercial aircraft at a nearby civilian hangar. It was a cover, a partial truth, just enough to let her blend in while staying close to what she loved. Inside her apartment, she removed the medals from her folded uniform one by one and laid them on her kitchen table. A Bronze Star for valor in a classified Middle East operation, an Air Medal for completing 25 live combat missions, an elite pilot badge only 200 people in the world had earned, and one final piece of small, unmarked silver insignia, a personal commendation from General Raymond Steele himself, handed to her in silence after a mission that required presidential clearance. Across town, her mother, Gloria Thompson, had seen the video, the one Brad posted with the caption, "Diversity hire finally exposed." On the phone, Gloria's voice cracked. "Baby, how could they treat you like that? They don't know who you are." But Ava did, and that was enough. Outside her window, a government-issued black SUV sat parked at the corner, unmarked, motionless. But Ava noticed. Every detail mattered. She closed the curtain slowly and picked up a thick folder from under her floorboards filled with 3 years of printed screenshots, flight logs that vanished, maintenance reports altered, and comments from squad mates that could end careers. Because Ava Thompson wasn't planning a comeback. She was preparing for an airstrike. They laughed when she walked out of that hangar. But by Monday morning, they'd be staring at the sky, speechless. Saturday night, while Brad Callahan was uploading another TikTok mocking Ava's meltdown, complete with a fake voice and an over-the-top impersonation, Ava Thompson was 250 miles away from Fort Griffin deep in the Nevada desert, where the stars are bright, but secrets shine brighter. At the center of a restricted airfield that didn't exist on public maps sat Hangar Echo 1, the underground chamber for the nation's most dangerous aircraft. And parked inside, bathed in white light, was the only known prototype of the Spectre-class F-22 Raptor, a customized stealth jet so advanced its specs weren't even listed in Pentagon briefings. Ava didn't just have clearance to fly it. She had trained with its developers. Captain Tony Rodriguez, the aircraft's lead technician, looked at her with concern as she completed her systems check. "You're sure about this, Ava? Once you go live, your entire classified record will be public. Your ghost status will be burned." Ava placed her hand gently on the cool titanium frame of the aircraft. "Tony, I've been pretending to be someone else for 2 years. Working civilian jobs, fixing airplanes, drinking bad coffee, watching Netflix like everyone else. But I've come to realize," she paused and looked him dead in the eye, "normal is overrated." While Colonel Albright was sipping whiskey and Brad was counting likes, Ava's flight path was being loaded into a classified live broadcast system that would stream securely to every terminal at Fort Griffin, under the guise of a mandatory tech demonstration. Every officer, every pilot, every recruit, all ordered to report to Hangar 7 at 0800 Monday. Dress uniforms. No exceptions. Back at Fort Griffin, confusion spread like wildfire. "Why wasn't I told about this demonstration?" Albright barked at his assistant, slamming the printed summons on his desk. The younger officer shrugged nervously. "Sir, it's from General Steele's office. Top-level clearance. We're all required to attend." Brad Callahan, oblivious to the storm gathering, posted another caption, "Probably bringing in some token pilot to show how woke we are. What a circus." The post gained 200 likes in an hour. But Brad had no idea that every single post, every digital smear, was being archived in a classified evidence vault by legal operatives working directly under General Steele's orders. Monday morning arrived. At 7:45 a.m., Ava parked her silver Honda Civic in the visitor's lot. In her passenger seat, a thick black folder sat ready, her original military credentials, operation stamps from 4 continents, and clearance tags so sensitive even base commanders weren't allowed to see them. As she walked toward Hangar 7, 300 military personnel were already gathered, buzzing with speculation. Colonel Albright stood near the front, irritated but curious. Brad stood behind him, phone in hand, camera rolling. "What kind of joke is this?" Albright muttered. "Some publicity stunt." Then the air changed. The roar of turbines sliced through the morning sky like a blade. But this wasn't any roar. It was higher-pitched, sharper, predatory. 300 heads turned as a black shadow emerged over the ridge, sleek, angular, faster than anything they'd ever seen. The F-22 Raptor screamed overhead at just 200 feet, slicing the sky like a surgeon's scalpel. Gasps filled the air. Even the most seasoned pilots had never seen aerial maneuvering like this, rolls that bent physics, turns that mocked gravity, a symphony of flight that felt like it was being performed by something more than human. Colonel Albright squinted, stunned. "Who the hell is flying that thing?" Brad's camera shook as he zoomed in, trying to steady his hands. No one answered, because no one had words. Only Ava knew what came next, and she wasn't done writing her story. She was just taking off. 300 soldiers stared at the sky. In 90 seconds, they'd be staring at their own shame. As the F-22 Raptor touched down with a grace that felt more ballet than battlefield, a hush swept across Hangar 7. The aircraft taxied slowly, deliberately, toward the hangar doors. Every eye tracked it like it was some mythical beast returning from war. When the cockpit finally opened, the silence cracked. A figure climbed out, unhooking their helmet. Black hair spilled over regulation flight gear. "No way," Brad Callahan whispered, his phone slipping slightly in his sweaty palm. Colonel Albright blinked hard, his jaw slack. It was her, Ava Thompson, the woman they had publicly humiliated, the so-called diversity hire, the one Albright ordered out of uniform just 72 hours earlier, now stepping down from the most advanced aircraft the military had ever built. She didn't need to say a word. Her very presence rewrote everything. But Ava did speak. She walked calmly to the microphone at the center of the hangar floor. Every step echoed like a drumbeat. She looked out over the sea of stunned faces, some ashamed, some confused, others trembling. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Ava Ghost Thompson," she said, her voice steady, clear, and impossible to ignore. "For the past 2 years, I've served undercover, observing how this base treats the people it claims to support." Colonel Albright flinched. From the ceiling, a screen descended, and then the reckoning began. First image, Brad Callahan's video, mocking her removal. Second, a screenshot of his Instagram caption, "Diversity, pilot finally exposed." Third, Albright and 2 officers laughing in the background. "That's just the beginning," Ava continued. "Over the last 3 months, I've documented the systematic sabotage, racial bias, and abuse of power perpetrated not just against me, but against 23 other minority service members." Documents flashed on the screen, falsified evaluations, manipulated performance records, even redacted medical reports. One pilot's career was destroyed after Albright altered his test scores. Another, a Latino officer, was medically retired after a falsified injury report. Then Ava turned to Brad. "Mr. Callahan," she said calmly, "you created hashtags like #RealPilotsOnly, mocked women and minorities in uniform, and uploaded 47 videos targeting your fellow soldiers. As of this morning, your content has been viewed by over 200,000 people." He tried to speak. I didn't mean." "You meant every word," she interrupted. "And now they'll mean something in court." General Raymond Steele stepped forward. His presence was thunderous. "Colonel Albright," he said coldly, "you are hereby charged with misconduct, racial discrimination, and falsification of official documents. Your commission is revoked, effective immediately." Albright slumped into a chair, his authority gone. "As for you, Mr. Callahan," Steele continued, "you are permanently banned from every military facility in the United States. And a criminal investigation into incitement to hatred begins today." Brad turned ghost pale. Ava approached the colonel one last time. "3 days ago, you told me I didn't belong in uniform," she said quietly. "Today, you found out I'm one of only 5 people alive authorized to fly a prototype that cost more than the GDP of an entire state." She turned to the crowd. "And to those of you who laughed, who filmed, who stayed silent, remember this. Underestimating someone because of how they look might just be the most expensive mistake of your lives." And with that, Ava Thompson didn't just clear her name. She set the record and the sky on fire. They tried to erase her legacy in a hangar. 6 months later, that same hangar bore her name in gold. 6 months after the day the skies silenced every doubter at Fort Griffin, something remarkable had happened. Where humiliation once echoed, transformation now roared. The former Hangar 7, the scene of Ava's public disgrace, had been renovated, repainted, and renamed. At the entrance, a polished brass plaque gleamed under the Texas sun. Lieutenant Colonel Ava Ghost Thompson Center for Aviation Excellence. No one could have predicted it, not the officers who looked away, not the commanders who stayed silent, and certainly not the boy who once mocked her online. But Ava hadn't just cleared her name. She'd built an institution. Inside the state-of-the-art facility, rows of cadets, men and women of every background, every race, every story, practiced maneuvers with a precision that rivaled seasoned pilots. And above them, mounted like a relic of battle, hung the very helmet Ava wore the day she redefined what excellence looked like. At her office window, Ava watched the flight drills as Captain Jennifer Martinez approached with a clipboard. "Commander," Jennifer said, smiling. "The first semester stats just came in." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Another record?" Jennifer grinned. 98% pass rate. The highest in Air Force training history. Half of the graduates are women. Nearly 60% are minorities." Ava exhaled slowly, not with surprise, but with deep satisfaction. "That's what happens," she said, "when you stop gatekeeping excellence and start nurturing it." Meanwhile, the fallout from the old regime continued. Colonel Albright, once untouchable, had been stripped of his pension, his medals, and his military rank. The investigation uncovered 15 years of misconduct, a tangled web of bias, report tampering, and quiet sabotage. He now worked nights as a private security guard at a shopping mall in Amarillo, his eyes dull, his posture slumped. The man who once barked orders across a hangar was now politely asking teenagers not to skateboard in food courts. Brad Callahan's downfall had been even swifter. His viral videos became Exhibit A in a landmark military defamation and cyberbullying case. Civil aviation companies blacklisted him. His father's political clout couldn't save him. Online, he was known as the toxic pilot influencer, a cautionary tale in every leadership seminar from Annapolis to Nellis. But Ava never spoke of them. She didn't need to. Her revenge wasn't personal. It was systemic. Her flight academy had drawn attention from around the globe. Delegations from 23 countries had already visited to learn her training methodology. And the manual she authored, Leadership Beyond Bias, was now required reading in elite military schools worldwide. Colonel Tony Rodriguez, now Ava's second-in-command, stepped into her office holding a sealed folder. "Ava," he said, placing it gently on her desk. "You've been requested." She opened it. Her eyes scanned the contents. An official invitation with presidential authorization. "Commander Ava Thompson, you are appointed to lead the first United States military space mission with a fully diverse crew." Rodriguez watched her reaction. She said nothing, just smiled and closed the folder. But then, she looked at the wall. Framed there were two photos. One showed her, kneeling on the hangar floor, folding her stripped uniform as a sea of soldiers looked on. The second, taken just weeks ago, showed her standing in that very same hangar, now filled with hundreds of cadets from every corner of America, proudly saluting under her command. "Do you know what I learned from all of this?" Ava asked, her voice soft. Rodriguez shook his head. "They tried to humiliate me in front of everyone to prove I didn't belong. But humiliation only works if you believe it. I knew exactly who I was. They were the ones who needed to figure it out." Outside, the sound of jet engines filled the sky. Inside, the new future of aviation stood ready to launch. They tried to bury her career in silence. Instead, she became the blueprint for a new generation of warriors. 2 years after the day she flew the impossible plane before an audience of doubters, Ava Thompson stood in a conference room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, not as a guest, not as a token, but as the commander of the first U.S. military space mission with a 100% diverse crew. The team she handpicked included women, immigrants, first-generation college graduates, and veterans once written off by the old guard. And yet, every one of them had earned their place not through pity, not through policy, but through performance that shattered expectations. As she reviewed the launch protocols, her phone buzzed. A message from a familiar name lit up her screen: Tony Rodriguez. "Half of the officers who watched you get humiliated that day have now signed up for inclusive leadership training. The other half? Well, the world's changing, whether they're ready or not." Ava chuckled, not out of pride, but because she knew the work was just beginning. She glanced at her office wall. 2 photographs were mounted there. In the first, she was seen kneeling on the cold hangar floor, laying down her uniform as 300 silent soldiers watched, some indifferent, some mocking. In the second, that same hangar was now alive with energy cadets of all races, genders, backgrounds, and beliefs in perfect formation beneath the banner: "Excellence has no uniform, only standards." And then came the call from Detroit. Her mother. "Baby, I just saw you on CNN again," Gloria Thompson said through proud tears. "They were showing your graduation speech. Do you remember what I always told you growing up?" Ava smiled. "Never let anyone tell you you're less than who you are." "That's right," her mother whispered. "And now the whole world knows who my daughter really is." That night, as Ava sat by the window reviewing launch trajectories, she received a message that stopped her in her tracks. It was from a 16-year-old black boy in Chicago. "Commander Thompson, I saw your story online. People say I can't be a pilot because I live in the South Side and go to a broken school. But after seeing you, I believe I can. Thank you." It wasn't the first message like that. In fact, it was the 132nd that week. But this one made her pause, because it confirmed something she'd known all along. Her real mission wasn't just in the sky, it was on the ground, in the hearts of those who'd been told they'd never fly. Elsewhere, the fallout continued. Brad Callahan, once an arrogant poster boy for privilege, had tried to quietly enlist as an Army technician. His application was flagged. The recruiter, a black veteran who had watched Ava's flight live 2 years ago, looked up from the file and said only 5 words. "We remember you, Callahan. Character matters." Rejection. Silence. No appeal. Ava didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Because her victory was never about revenge. It was about replacing a system that protected arrogance with one that rewarded discipline, dignity, and purpose. At the final graduation ceremony before her space mission, Ava stood before 200 new pilots. The cadets black, white, Latino, Asian, indigenous, disabled, immigrants stood straighter in her presence. She looked over them and delivered the words she'd waited her whole life to say. True victory is not making your enemies pay. It's building a world where the next generation never has to fight the same battle. When you live with excellence, your enemies don't need to be destroyed. They destroy themselves while you build legacies. Ava stepped away from the podium. And just outside, a new generation of jets took flight, soaring higher than prejudice ever could. This story isn't just about one woman standing tall in a storm of bias. It's about what happens when someone chooses purpose over pain, silence over spite, and legacy over revenge. Ava Thompson didn't fight back with anger. She fought back with undeniable excellence. She didn't destroy her enemies, they collapsed under the weight of their own arrogance. What it teaches us is simple but urgent. Excellence doesn't need permission. Dignity is power. And silence, when strategic, can shake institutions. Whether you're fighting bias at school, in the workplace, or in society, remember, you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to show up prepared, focused, and unstoppable. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, made you proud, or made you angry in the best way, leave a comment right now with one word. Ready. Ready to lead. Ready to rise. Ready to build a world where merit speaks louder than privilege. Drop your thoughts below. Every comment matters. Like this video if you believe excellence has no color, no gender, no boundaries. And subscribe to the channel for more true stories that prove justice isn't loud. It's precise and unforgettable. The skies aren't the limit, they're the starting point.